So we're back with Manacled, the Harry Potter fanfic, where they are actively trying to impregnate a 15, 16-year-old girl to repopulate after the war that happened during, apparently around Order of the Phoenix. Harry is dead. Harry Potter is dead! He was hung up to rot. He was killed and his body was hung up in the Great Hall, I think, and his body just started rotting. Pretty much everyone's dead except for Hermione, who is now at the High Reeves house, who happens to be Voldemort's right hand, and despite what I thought initially, it wasn't actually Voldemort's literal right hand, which would have been great. But no, it's actually Draco Malfoy. And so he is essentially going to rape her whenever he wants. She's also supposed to do, menial tasks around the house, kind of like a house elf, except she's not an elf. But we're on chapter 5. I'm still wondering when things are actually going to happen, because of course it has trigger warnings in the beginning, but all right. Hermione explored the room she had just been placed in. There was little to it that hadn't immediately met the eye. The wardrobe was filled with more of the same scarlet dresses, yeah, and also the handmaiden tale, with the robes, the red robes and the bonnets and all. That's what she's wearing. If I remember, she's not wearing any like bra or panties or anything. It's just, the robe, the bonnet, and then she's got like the footwear, like the socks and shoes or whatever, but she's not wearing anything underneath. I'm guessing for easy access. Same scarlet dresses and robes that she was currently wearing. They were in various weights, presumably for summer and winter weather. The drawers held more bonnets and woolen stockings. Yeah, that's right. More flimsy red shoes. Hermione put her pulled a pair, put her hair in the drawer. She's just like, actually, that makes me think of Chamber of Secrets, because if you at the end of near the end of the movie, where they go into Lockhart, into the office, and Lockhart is kind of scrambling to put things away, you see a wig sitting on his desk. So it just makes me think of like Lockhart. He just like takes his hair off and puts. Hermione pulled a pair out of the drawer and stared at them. The soles were thin and they were fabric. They would wear through rapidly. If she wanted to run, she'd have to steal some new clothes and shoes. The portraits on the wall was a young witch, pretty and blonde, undoubtedly one of Malfoy's ancestors. She had the same sharp features and disdainful expression. She must have been real fun to be around. Life of the party. The witch couldn't have been more than just graduated from Hogwarts when this was painted. She stared indifferently at Hermione, seated casually in a high-backed chair, a book beside her. Eventually, Hermione turned away and surveyed the rest of the room. There was a door designed to blend in with the wall across the room. She went over and opened it. A bathroom, primarily occupied by a large clawfoot tub. No shower, nothing but the most essential objects were provided: soap, towels, a toothbrush, and a small cup for water. Hermione walked over and washed her hands. As she withdrew them, she pretended to accidentally knock the cup off the counter. It hit the ground with a loud, sharp sound, but failed to break or even crack. There was a protection charm on it. Malfoy was thorough, probably thinking that they would try to cut them, slit their throats or something, or cut their wrists, and to be relieved of duty. So charm was put on it so that way it didn't break. Clever. What are we doing now? Yeah, it went a little too far. That's what she said. Probably. What? Oh wow, we are already way at the end. Hang on. Okay. Malfoy was thorough. She picked it up and rinsed it before replacing it. As she turned, she found that there was a portrait in the bathroom as well. The same young witch stood studying Hermione with a knowing look. Oh, so she could tattle, just like the kittens did. You know, the kittens with um in Umbridge's office. Well, when she was, with Defense Against the Dark Arts and all that, she had all those little kitten plates and pictures. And when Harry and the others went in there, it was the kittens who pretty much snitched on him. Hermione feigned innocence and walked back into the bedroom. Within an hour, there was nothing left to possibly inspect in her room. Not that Hermione expected to find anything or get into much trouble with the piercing supervision of the portrait on the wall. I was going to say, why not cover it? But these things are sentient, so they could just say, hey, they covered my portrait up in the room. You should go check on them. So it's kind of hard when magic's involved. Magic is just not good here. The witch had apparently had been ordered to watch Hermione like a hawk. Hermione went to the door of the bedroom, and after a moment's hesitation, she turned the knob and walked into the hall. And then Malfoy was like, "I want you to turn my knob." Her heart immediately began pounding. So did Malfoy. The sense of terror and freedom that she experienced by merely walking into another room by herself was staggering. As she pulled the door shut behind herself, and she leaned against the door and tried to take a slow breath. Her fingers twitched around the doorknob as she glanced around and tried to compose herself. The long hallway that vanished into the darkness felt so open. She swallowed. Just the descriptions. Everything she's doing could easily be implemented when, with Malfoy. Swallowing, fingers around his knob. Come on. Come on. She swallowed nervously. She had assumed some effects of her long imprisonment would continue to haunt her. Actually experiencing it was more than unsettling. It was horrifying. Her attempts to breathe and calm down were failing. Her chest stuttered in tiny, rapid inhalations, the only sound in the cold, dark wing of the manor. She bit her lip, her mind. She had always been able to trust her mind. Even her locked memories felt like a defense mechanism. Finding herself panicking and hyperventilating because she had walked into a hallway of her own volition. This was a betrayal. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried to breathe evenly, tried to pull her hand free from the doorknob that she was clutching desperately, as though she would drown if she let it go. Her ability to reason and tell herself that she was all right was insufficient persuasion to her mind and body. She tried to make herself take a step away from the door, but her legs refused to cooperate. Sounds like me in the morning. Actually, sounds like me just every day. My body just doesn't want to cooperate anymore. It was a hallway. Just a hallway, she told herself. She was allowed to be there. There was no command holding her back. There were no commands holding her back, just herself. After standing there for several minutes, trying and failing to force herself to move, she abruptly sobbed and huddled closer to the door. She couldn't remember the last time she had cried, long ago in her cell. As she stood there, shaking and hyperventilating in the hallway of the empty wing of the manor, she cried. Over everyone who is now dead. For everyone Malfoy had killed. For all the girls back at Hogwarts being sent out into the world of horror. Out of rage over the manacles locked around her wrists, and the manacles she found she had somehow locked around her own mind. She went back into her room, closed the door, and sank onto the floor and kept crying. It took a full day before she could force herself into the hallway again. She was determined to make herself overcome the panic. The next morning, she opened the door wide, crouched on the bed, and made herself stare at the hallway until her heart stopped pounding painfully in her chest from the mere sight. She would lose all chance of escape if she couldn't even walk out of her room without having a mental breakdown. She sat in the bed and ate breakfast. I was going to say, apparently it just appeared. that appeared while she contemplated the problem. It had manifested when she was alone. She wasn't sure if it was because of the manacle's compulsion to be obedient. Uh, sure if it was because the manacle's compulsion to be obedient had previously distracted her from it, or if there was an insidious form of mental trauma that being imprisoned for so long had damaged her to the point that being controlled by others was the only way she would know. Only way she knew how to function now. She hoped it was simply the manacles, but she feared that it was the latter. Imprisonment had eaten away at her psyche in ways she felt afraid of fully realizing. She steeled herself. She was determined to overcome it, whatever it took. Whatever it takes. She knows she can make it through. She should go to Degrassi instead. I mean, there's just as many problems there, so. Drugs, shootings, Drake. Seriously, I doubt many people will get that reference. Drake, like music artist. He was on Degrassi. He was Jimmy, and then Jimmy got shot by Rick, and he ended up in a wheelchair. But I think in Degrassi he had the moniker of like Drake, like that was his like music name. So humble beginnings. Um, when her dinner appeared that evening, she made herself eat it while sitting by the open door. Her hands shook so much she dropped half the food from the fork, like she had dementia. By the time she finished eating, the trembling in them had eased enough so she could drink water without spilling it down her front. She stared down the hallway. She stared at all the shrouded furniture and many portraits of cold-faced, pale aristocrats. And then they were surrounded by aristocats, because everybody wants to be a cat. She tried to remember what she knew of Malfoy. Well, I mean, the fact that she was constantly called a mudblood by him. The fact that he was a narcissistic, egotistical, self-centered, manipulative asshole. I mean, but then he was older, and we see him that he wasn't truly a bad kid. He was kind of forced to do things like he didn't want to kill Dumbledore. So, spoiler alert, Snape kills Dumbledore. How he had managed to climb so high in Voldemort's ranks at such a young age. He had been involved in Dumbledore's death at the beginning of six. Oh, well, did he actually kill Dumbledore here, or was Snape still the one who stepped in? The circumstances of that have never been entirely clear. She remembered being awakened abruptly by the castle's screaming wards during the aftermath. Minerva, McGonagall, and the rest of the professors had been pale with shock and horror as they frantically tried to discover what happened. Malfoy vanished in the chaos. It was the first and last major event of the war that Hermione associated specifically with Malfoy. After he disappeared into Voldemort's ranks, another faceless Death Eater. His mother had died several years in the war. Hermione remembered hearing about Narcissa Malfoy's death in Lestrange Manor. It happened during a rescue mission. Harry and Ron had been caught by Snatchers. When the Order went to rescue them, a Death Eater lost control of Fiend Fire Curse and burned down the manor with Narcissa and Bellatrix inside it. I'm sorry, but like, Bellatrix, if anything, is a powerful witch. Couldn't she just take Narcissa and like they could apparate somewhere? Like we see the Death Eaters fucking flying around in like a smoke form. Like they have. I'm sorry, if Harry, Ron, and Hermione were able to escape a fiend fire in the fucking room of requirement, pretty sure Narcissa and Bellatrix could have escaped. I'm just saying. Narcissa's death had driven Lucius Malfoy insane. He had slid easily into Bellatrix's vacated shoes of madness. He placed the blame for Narcissa's death squarely on Ron and Harry and devoted himself to avenging her by hunting down the Weasleys. Arthur Weasley's brain damage had the near death of George during the war had both been caused by Lucius. He became a loose cannon within Voldemort's ranks. He'd been too useful and deadly for the insubordination to get him killed, for his insubordination to get him killed, but he'd constantly danced on that line. It had occurred to Hermione that Lucius might be the High Reeve, given how vicious, hate-filled, and quick to murder he was. Since he wasn't, Hermione wondered if he was still alive. Perhaps following the war, he finally overstepped and got himself killed. Hermione hoped so. The way Lucius had laughed while Ron died screaming in agony, Hermione would never banish that memory. But Malfoy... She didn't think he'd be treated as particularly important or considered a significant Death Eater during the Order meetings she recalled. Whatever he'd done to claw his way to the very top must have occurred toward the end of the war. Perhaps he had been involved with whatever caused the Order's plans during the final battle to fall apart. Because she's been a healer, Hermione hadn't been there for the entire battle. Something in their stage had gone wrong. Their strategy had gone wrong. There had been far more Death Eaters than the Order had anticipated. Voldemort had cast a killing curse, and Harry had fallen. And then he had commanded Lucius to confirm Harry was dead. Harry Potter is dead! So Voldemort cast another killing curse, and another, and another, and another, and another. After a half a dozen killing curses... I'm sorry, but like Voldemort, I just, so he like kills Harry and he's like, again, God. It's like, okay, I think he's dead. One killing curse is enough to kill him. So I don't know what you're expecting with 15 of them, sir. Voldemort had gone and confirmed for himself that Harry Potter was dead. For insurance, he had Harry's body dragged up into the air and hung from the astronomy tower. Yeah, that's right, the astronomy tower. Everyone watched as Voldemort cursed Harry's body with fast-acting necrosis curse, and the entire thing rotted away before their eyes. Harry's blank green eyes, Hermione saw them every time she closed her own. The expression on his face, the realization he had failed, had been written into it in death. Hermione shook as she thought about it. Her best friends had died before her eyes. By some extra cruel twist of fate, she hadn't been allowed to follow them. They had left her behind. She squared her shoulders and forced herself to step into the hallway. She had faced the manner of heart. She had faced all manner of heart. Yeah. You watch your friends die, but you can't go into a hallway. She wasn't going to be defeated by her own fractured psyche in a hallway. Unless it's like some fucking Five Nights at Freddy's bullshit. And they've got like the little discs or whatever, the gas going around and suddenly like seeing giant freaking nightmare type creatures walking around. Open the closet and there's Nightmare, Foxy. One step, two step, 3, 4. Her breathing grew fainter. She clenched her hands into fists until she could feel her nails sinking to her skin. 5, 6, 7. Drip, drip, drip. 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. She froze and looked down. One of her hands was dripping blood into it. Oh, that's not good. Someone's gonna get a beating. Into a trail on the floor. It was the same shade as her dress. She stared down at it until a puddle the size of a nut gradually collected by her feet. Then she continued down the hall. She counted the dripping sounds instead of her footsteps until she reached the end. She had no destination. I mean, it's a mansion. So you go until you can't go anymore. You turn around and you go back the other way. So she turned around and started back, trying the knobs of the doors along the way. Some were locked, others weren't. She'd peek into more empty bedrooms filled with shrouded furniture. Is it actually furniture, or are there people on those? She wouldn't return and explore them all carefully. She would return and explore them all carefully later. Perhaps something that might prove useful would be found in them, like people. Kind of like the dude's dad in Dead Silence, you know, at the end of the movie where his guy's dad, he's in a wheelchair and he's got the blanket on him, but he finds that his dad's not actually alive, that his dad's been made into a puppet, and like his whole back part is like completely like gutted out, and he's got like a pole or rod in there to like move him. If it was like that, you know, they're all like puppets. Everyone's a puppet, man. Um, she was shaking as she re-entered the room, feeling drained, and immediately crawled into bed. As she fell asleep, she dreamed of I dream of Ginny. Da 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 da. I dream of Jeannie. I dream of Ginny. I hate being old. I really do. Ginny from near the end of the war, with hair cut above her shoulders and a long, cruel scar down the side. Because we can't have a fanfic without someone having a scar on the side of their face. Like Yamcha! Ginny, someone's gonna catch Ginny's full fang fist. And then she's gonna end up like that on the ground. She was huddled next to a bed and looked up sharply as Hermione as though startled. Ginny's expression was twisted in anguish, covered in tears. She was sobbing uncontrollably. Ginny, Hermione heard herself say. Ginny, what's wrong? What happened? As Ginny opened her mouth to answer, the dream faded. What's the matter, Mr. Fingers? You not like my mouth words? When Hermione woke the next morning, she knew she must have been dreaming. What had she been dreaming about? She couldn't remember. Something sad. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eye. You mean her palms? Like her palm? I guess you could say it's a heel. You know, like right here where out a little more and you're like, oh. You're like, oh, and oh. She couldn't remember something sad. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and tried to remember. So she's sitting there like, ugh. She couldn't bring herself to go near the door that day. She huddled by the window and looked out at the misty gardens that lay outside. There was a hedge maze to one side. She traced her way through it with her eyes. She studied all the grounds of the estate that she could see, trying to take note of anything that could be useful. Where could she go if she was trying to hide? If she was trying to escape? The day passed slowly, because there was a time spell in play, and it made the day go by incredibly slowly. Having a sense of time once again was vaguely unsettling. The steady ticking of the clock constantly caught her attention, and continuous grating sound. If she let herself listen to it for long, it made her fingers begin to spasm with each click of the gears. She found that her mind had a tendency toward wandering and losing itself. She would interrupt herself from some odd thought and realize hours had passed. As the day drew to a close, she stared at the door. She should make herself go out there again. She hadn't even seen Malfoy since she'd arrived. She had intended to try to watch him, study him, arm herself with some kind of understanding of him. All those plans had faded away during the last 2 days. She stood up and moved slowly toward the door. As she was wrapping her fingers around the knob, there was a sudden pop behind her. Starting, she turned sharply and found a house elf standing behind her. Dobby, sir. Dobby the house elf. Although, would it be Dobby? Or would Dobby, or because it's Malfoy. I mean, Dobby was the house elf of the Malfoys, so would Dobby still be technically their house elf? You is to get ready for tonight, Mistress is saying. Yeah, that's not Dobby. Dobby doesn't talk like that. The elf said, averting its eyes and then popping away. Hermione felt as though her heart were in her throat. That's not going to be the only thing in her throat. Her hands started trembling. Her palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. Malfoy spaghetti. She considered for a moment, not readying herself. Undoubtedly, if she did, Malfoy would appear and force her to. Who knew what else he would do to her if she provoked him? The compulsions in her mind stirred, obedient, not to resist. Her brain automatically began cataloging the things that she had been instructed to do. She wasn't sure if the compulsion made her rationalize obeying, or if this obeying actually was a rational choice. She went to the bathroom and turned on the tap in the bath. The scalding water poured out, and she watched the tub slowly fill. She wondered if she could somehow drown herself before. Yeah, I seriously doubt. I'm sure there's an enchantment on that too. Kind of like with the cave. Remember when Harry tries to scoop water for Dumbledore, but then when he scoops it, he does Aquamente, and he tries to scoop it, but there nothing is like water. It was physically there, but he wasn't able to scoop it. Could be a like that where she could get into the water, but if she tries to go under the water itself, it'll just kind of be like she's not actually in it. You know, like she's in the water, but when she tries to do it, the water basically doesn't exist despite her fact that she's in it. And we know it's possible because, like I said, it was in the cave, because the whole point of it was naturally it's like, oh yeah, the potion's going to make you incredibly thirsty. You're going to see a bowl or whatever, and you're going to, conjure some water, but by, not able to do it, it forces you to take water from the lake, which the Inferi are in there, and that causes you to basically be dragged down to your death, because as soon as you make contact with that water, they just reach out and grab you. So it was there for a purpose, but I would imagine it could be the same thing in this case. It's like, oh, you want to drown yourself? Good luck. Good luck. Before Malfoy could get there, as Lord of the Manor, he could probably apparate anywhere. She shuddered at the thought of having him drag her, naked, out of the water by her hair. She pulled off her robes and sank into the water, hissing but relishing the pain. She hardly felt anything nowadays. Apparently, the manacles did restrict her from the heat. Restrict her from heat. That was a useful piece of information to file away. After she had washed, she dried herself with a lavish, oversized bath towel. She then pulled on a fresh set of robes, the long scarlet button dress, and then the open scarlet robe. She then pulled on the stockings. She hated them so much. If it weren't freezing inside the manor, she would have never have worn them. Aside from the dreadful red color, it could almost she could almost pretend the robes were just clothing, but the horrid crotchlessness left her feeling, yeah, because like I said, I think she doesn't have anything underneath. Like she doesn't have any underwear or anything on. It's just the robe. She would only get knickers if she was bleeding or pregnant. Otherwise, she was to remain, yeah, right there. She was to remain accessible. When she was dressed, she stood uncertainly in the middle of her room. She wasn't sure where she was supposed to go, what she was supposed to do. The door abruptly swung open, and Astoria appeared, looking white as a sheet. No. Good, you're ready. I was afraid I'd have to send Draco to drag you, Astoria said as she glanced up and down Hermione with a critical expression. And Astoria is Malfoy's wife, but she doesn't really like him that much anyway. It's just kind of to, pure bloods and all that. I'll show you where to go tonight. After this, I shall be elsewhere. I'll expect you to prepare and go there every designated night without issue. I was realizing you really don't need all the body parts you have just in order to reproduce. So if you're thinking of causing problems, keep that in mind. Yeah. So if you want to cut off your arms, cut off your legs, and think you'll be relieved of duty, nope. He only needs your ovaries. So unless you plan on doing something to those, a chill ran down Hermione's spine, and she nodded. Astoria swept from the room, leading Hermione through the house, out into the foyer, and then up a large staircase and down a second floor hallway. The portraits muttered as they passed. Whore! Hermione heard it and murmured more than once. Astoria stopped at the seventh door. Oh, we're going with the 7, huh? What are you, J.K. Rowling? Go in and wait. Draco will come when he chooses. Oh, I'm sure he will. But you're to be in there at 8 o'clock sharp. Without pausing further, Astoria continued down the hallway and disappeared into the darkness. That was the inner self, her heart coming out and cloaking her. Hermione's hands were trembling as she grasped the doorknob and tried to open it. It wouldn't turn at first, and she had to take several deep breaths to calm herself and make her hands stop shaking enough to grasp and turn it. Stepping into the room, she took in every detail. It felt sterile. She had assumed that her room was bare and cold out of indifference. Or perhaps it was simply the way Malfoy was. There was a large bed, towering wardrobe, a desk, and a chair. I mean, I get the large bed, and I get the desk and chair. Does he fuck people in the wardrobe? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He's the lion. Hermione... What am I doing? Hermione would have imagined Malfoy as having a more luxurious room. All green and silver with expensive sheets and throw pillows covered with too many tassels. No, I mean, I can imagine the green and silver, with the Slytherin colors and, just who they are. But like the pillows, the throw pillows with tassels, I don't know. I mean, that would maybe be like his mother kind of thing. I don't see Malfoy, Draco with like tasseled pillows and the room before her could have belonged to a monk. Well, maybe he meditates in there. It was functional. That was really all that could be said about it. No wonder Malfoy was so cold. She shied away from the bed and went over to the chair by the desk. Sitting down, she looked over at the contents of the desk's surface, blank parchment and quills. She held her hand out hesitantly toward the quills, wondering if she was able to touch them. As her fingers got close, she felt a faint burning sensation. Because quills are sharp. So, nope. You want to try to kill yourself with one of those? Like right in the neck or something? Nope. Sorry, they're enchanted too. Of course, someone could always just fight through the pain. It's all about mental endurance. Her stomach was twisting itself with dread, and she tried to distract herself by reciting arithmancy formulas while she sat there. She was used to waiting endlessly. What was an hour after 16 months of sensory deprivation? Yeah. It was like, it's just an hour. I spent 16 months, a year and some odd months in deprivation, so. I read that last thing, but I skipped ahead. Sorry. She just needed to stop thinking about what was going to happen next. Her stomach felt so twisted she thought she might be sick. Suddenly the door clicked. She stood and turned sharply in time to see Malfoy stride in. Rev up that pussy! I'm so glad the chapter's over. I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry. Time to see Malfoy stride in. His hand was up at his throat, pulling his collar loose. He clearly had not expected to find her there. What? He stopped abruptly and stared at her, actually seeming too pale slightly before pressing his lips together in a hard line. Mudblood, he said after a moment. Today is the day I see. And that's the end of chapter 5. So he gets Hermione, and like she's told to go into the room, and he goes in there, and it's like, oh, what are you doing here? I'm sorry, what? Who? Expecting maybe the Adams family? No one's gonna get that reference either. I'm sorry, I'm old. But yeah, that was chapter 5. I can't wait to get up to chapter 15. Anyway, Malfoy has entered the chat. So I'm assuming we're going to see some stuff next time. Next time on Dragon Ball Z. Anyone? I'm done. Bye.